Welcome everybody to In Darkness a Light Still Shines. I'm Barry Feaker, Executive Director of the Topeka Rescue Mission. I have a really great friend with me here today, and this is Gary Graff, who is a nurse practitioner with the Cotton O'Neill Clinics here in Topeka. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks for having me.
Gary, thank you so much. We're going to talk today about a very potentially controversial aspect of helping people. But before that, I just want people to kind of know how we know each other. Gary and I have been friends for a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, I attribute this guy to saving my life many years ago. And it's not as dramatic as you might think. It's not like you rescued me from a burning plane or any of those kind of things. But I had some health issues many years ago, and Gary basically said, do you want to live? And so I said, yeah, it's probably a good idea. And so he really began to work with me around health issues, and I started exercising, lost some weight, and those kind of things. And so we've kind of gotten to know each other for a long time over the years, before that even.
Right.
So Gary, just a little bit, tell us what you do in regards to the medical arena.
Sure. So I've been doing diabetes and endocrinology at Cotton O'Neill for 15 years, and it's a great place to practice. We have 5 adult endocrinologists, 4 pediatric endocrinologists, and 6 nurse practitioners. And so for the little tiny town of Topeka, it's a really good mom and pop endocrine clinic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no one else I know in the Midwest has anything like this.
Wow.
It allows us to do a lot of help with the community, teaching. We do a lot of research. I've been involved in a lot of diabetic research trials, about 190 in the last 15 years. And then obviously seeing patients all day long and just trying to help them out, because it really is you don't just fix someone. Well, actually, we fixed you, but most people we don't fix.
Well, it's kind of debatable.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, most people are not fixed with their diabetes. We just get them under control and try and keep them alive for 50 more years. So, and then prior to that, I really tell that all the time with my patients.
50 more years. Okay.
50 more years,
We're
yeah.
good.
And then prior to that, I was doing family practice for 3 years. I still work at Minor Med on Thursday nights, and it's kind of a secondary job I started when my family was young and needed extra cash. So now I tell people it's my court-ordered community service job. I'm joking, it's not. I love doing it. It's just hard to do that after a long day.
So you see a lot of people with all kinds of different issues, not just endocrinology issues.
That's correct. I keep my other skills brushed up.
So Gary, I know before all this, you served in the military, and you were in Desert Shield over in the Middle East.
Yes.
And when you came back, you started at some point working with veterans, and eventually would then be a representative for the VA hospital here at the Rescue Mission, working with our veterans who are homeless. And that's been a long time ago. But what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. Well, you're correct. I was in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. We were in charge of a 6-bed operating room, and we actually had, I think, 11,000 patients that came through our hospital, and I think a couple hundred surgeries. So it was actually a working hospital. Obviously, most of our patients were Iraqis and Iraqi family members. Very few were actually U.S. or coalition forces there. So it was actually a very interesting scenario, because you have people who are kind of like what we're going to talk about maybe today, don't have a home, and have been have to leave their home or things like that. Displaced in some way. And I remember the wards. This is kind of weird, but the wards were chanting George Bush, George Bush, George Bush. Yeah, at night. It was just kind of fun. But they hadn't been fed in a long time. They didn't have clean water, and so they surrendered by the hundreds, and many of them were injured or shot or malnourished. When I came back, I finished my nursing degree, and then took a job at the VA here in Topeka. I did all sorts of different jobs at the VA, but one of the ones I really liked was working in the mental hygiene clinic or mental health clinic. We changed the name twice. And during that time, I was working with another friend, Randy Crandall.
Remember Randy? Yes,
Yep.
Good friend.
Yep. And so we were trying to get some money set aside that we could go and start shaking hands with the Rescue Mission, basically. And I remembered soliciting half a day per week to come up here and try and just engage veterans who were not coming to the VA for our services, and also trying to find out how we can get them, because most of those people had some type of not just homelessness maybe, but also some mental illness that would go along with it, PTSD or depression or anxiety, which we obviously were very good at treating at that point. it's kind of funny now, everybody has cell phones, so no one thinks about it, but we were able to get the American Legion to donate money for a landline, kind of a hotline from
right.
the White House to the Kremlin, but this was from the rescue mission to VA admissions. And it just picked
Not a
it
great
up.
analogy, but that's okay.
Yeah, I guess maybe not. But so that was our big accomplishment back then, and worked with a lot of homeless people, and had some neat stories then, but also some very sad stories there too.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate the time that you spent here with us on that, and you know your experience. And one of the reasons I wanted you to come be with us today is because you have worked with people who are disenfranchised, who have been displaced. And when you were in the Middle East, you worked with people who were in a desperate situation, injured, lost their identity, lost their country. They're actually coming over to the bad guys, so to speak, for help. And sometimes we find ourselves not necessarily working with the people who are the most pleasant or people that we probably that day would have decided to try to help, but they're in desperate need. And so today in America, we have a very polarizing issue. It's called immigration. Has been for a number of years now. We're talking about, you know, what do we do with people that end up on our soil? Should we keep them away? Should we allow them in? What do we do when they're here? Should we send them back? Whatever. And so we had a situation a number of years ago where an individual that was illegal came to the rescue mission, and he had severe health problems. And the process that we went through to work with this individual and the controversial feelings that we had and how others looked at that was something that we want to talk about today. So we're going to take a break here and talk a little bit about the rescue mission. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a man by the name of Rosario, who was from Mexico, didn't speak any English, ended up in Topeka, Kansas at a homeless shelter, and then he was about to die, and what we were able to do for Rosario. We'll be right back.
This production is hosted by Topeka Rescue Mission Ministries, bringing help and hope through faith with its sleeves rolled up. If you would like to support Topeka Rescue Mission Ministries, text TRM Give to 77977 and start giving today.
Welcome back, everybody. Talking with a good friend of mine, a great person that's helped the homeless here in Topeka, Gary Graff. And Gary, we've just been visiting about your experiences in working with people. I think that one of the things that we want to kind of pick back up on is that time that you were in Iraq and you were working with people who were trying to kill you, and they were coming to you injured, and how you were caring for them. People that maybe weren't the most pleasant people to you at one time and now are dependent upon you. We're going to come back to that in a minute, but this issue of immigration, and we're not going political here today at all. What we're going to do is try to unpack just one particular story that happened in this community. There's others, about a guy named Rosario that came in a number of years ago, and I remember him coming in the front door. He's this little small Hispanic fella that spoke no English, and somehow, some way, he ended up, for whatever reason, of course we couldn't totally understand his reasons, at a homeless shelter in Kansas, in Topeka, Kansas. And so the first thing that you try to do is you try to figure out, okay, what brought you here and how can we get you back? You know, because you're illegal and at some point somebody's going to say you can't be here anymore. But in the process of that, as we were trying to unpack all that, we found out that Rosario was a pretty sick guy. And he had kidney failure. And so he would go in and out of the emergency room. And I remember an organization called Kansas Dialysis that was here who would end up having Rosario in their care, and eventually he would need dialysis. And so what was remarkable is we were trying to work with the United States government, with the Mexican consulate, to try to get Rosario back home, and it just wasn't working. The immigration issue at this particular time wasn't the hottest topic as it is now. ICE wasn't even the name of the immigration at that point, and so people were saying pretty much, we don't want to care for him because he's expensive, and so somebody else take care of the guy. And as long as you're doing it at the rescue mission in Topeka, Kansas, we're not too interested in having him back in Mexico, and we're not too interested in having him a part of the United States government responsibility. And so one of the cool things that really impressed me is the care that the people at the rescue mission gave this guy. And he became kind of a friend of ours. He never could speak English much, but we kind of learned a little Spanish, and we had some interpreters. And he was very comical whenever we would serve Mexican food here at the mission. He was never quite satisfied with our style. He loved jalapenos, the whole 10 yards, and so he would always mock us, when we were trying to serve what we thought was Mexican food. The other remarkable thing was Kansas Dialysis, and how they were not getting any reimbursement for his care. And they just kept doing it over and over and over again. And it had to cost them an arm and a leg to do it. But the people with that organization said, we really got to take care of this guy, even though he doesn't belong here, even though he's not part of our community, whatever the case might be. But one day, about 2 years into this, I was serving on a medical ethics committee about what's ethical in regards to medicine as a community volunteer. And they were looking for case studies, and so I brought up Rosario. And I won't mention the group of people or anything other than it was an ethics discussion. And it was full of community people, it was full of medical people and docs. And so I laid out the case of Rosario is here, he's illegal, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. And here's what's happening, and he's costing a lot of money. And so I said, what do you think we ought to do? And to my astonishment, there were quite a number of people that said, you ought to let him die. And I was stunned. I was really stunned. But that was really the feeling. And that's the controversial feeling we have today, is if they're not part of us, if they're not here by good intentions or even legal or whatever, that we can turn our back on them. And I was grieved. But I thought, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe it's something that we just need to let this guy go. And I was thinking about you and your account of being in Iraq and these people coming at you, and they wanted to kill you yesterday, but today they're crying out for help. We weren't in that situation with Rosario. He was about as harmless as a butterfly. But we just had to make a decision. We had to make a decision. Are we going to say no more? And there were people who were not happy with me because we were sheltering an illegal alien. But I looked at him every day, and he had a heart of gold. He was a nice fella. He was gentle. He wanted to go home to be with his family. And so we worked a number of times, and we had everything set up one day to get him on an airplane, and we had KCI all ready to go, and the United States government, the Mexican consulate. And right as we were at Kansas City, to put him on an airplane, the Mexican consulate called me and said, can you guarantee that when he gets into, can't remember where he was going now, it was somewhere down south in a different airport, that he will get in a car to drive to Mexico? I said, I can't guarantee that. And they said, well, if you can't guarantee that, we're going to spend the money to send somebody up from Mexico to pick him up. And so they said, deal over. One of the things that probably was the case is they didn't want to handle his medical expenses.
Right.
And so everything fell apart. Rosario got sicker. It got to the point, and I don't understand all this, you probably do, but when people's kidney fails, even if they're on dialysis, eventually the body wears out.
That's correct. And
bones were becoming brittle. And all the time he was in casts. And at one time he was in a complete body cast, because if he would trip or fall, things would break inside. I mean, and here's this poor, helpless guy that some people literally said, put him on the street. Don't give him more dialysis. And fast forward that story a whole nother year, and finally we worked through things to be able to get Rosario reconnected with the Mexican consulate. And he was pretty well, I could guarantee now, he's going to get in the car because he's in a body cast. He can't get out of it. They took him home. We got a letter from his family that they were so grateful that we were able to get him back home and that we had kept him alive. And he passed away 2 weeks later. And so that was a tough journey for us. And it was and again, you're in the medical community. There were some people that were on one side of this fence and some people on the other. There were people in our own community that were saying, you're harboring illegal people here. But I had to look at the guy. And just like you were working with those Iraqi warriors that wanted to kill you at one time, and now they're asking for help. What are your thoughts when you hear about that, Gary? I mean, I know you're in the medical area. Do no harm, those kind of things, whatever that oath is.
Sure.
But what do we do about that?
I think that most people in healthcare want to do the right thing every time, and we don't look at the cost. In fact, I joke with my patients. I get paid the same whether you come and see me or not. So it's all about you coming to see me. for you, for your benefit. And we're there doing what we need to do every day. And if you go to the emergency room, you'll see the same thing. I think no one gets turned away when you go to the emergency room. We worry about the bills later on. And in the United States, our healthcare costs are very high, but part of that is because a lot of those things are being written off, large chunks. The dialysis center could never have afforded to do that if they were just barely scraping by. They're making money on other people, is my guess. But looking at my experiences overseas, you're exactly correct. I remember being just scared to the bones, doing guard duty, and then 3 months later, like you said, they were probably in our hospital, either shot or injured or just malnourished. They had no place to go. And so I think just the humanity portion of it, these people are just people, and your whole perspective changes when the circumstances change. And it's just like that. It's not like I have to stop and think about it, because I never stopped and think about it.
Now, that's with you. Is that with everybody?
I think most people in healthcare are like that. There's a few people that are maybe more brazen, and that's not necessarily immigrants. It could be even just their loved ones. It's time for this person to go.
So all human services people, get into this where we just kind of go through the motions.
That's
sometimes.
correct.
Even in ministry, you can get into that situation where it's just it's a project versus a person.
That's correct. Yeah. But in general, everybody that I think goes into healthcare goes in because they want to go in. I've counseled 2 of my own kids saying, yeah, you'd be great as a doctor, as a nurse practitioner, but you don't have the people skills. So go do something else.
I know your kids. I'm not going to ask you this.
I know which ones. I know, yeah. But that's just very true. But if you win in healthcare, it's because you really care about people.
Yeah.
And it's political agendas or wars, maybe, that maybe turn the way you think. But it's very easy to go back to your normal base nature, and that is to love these people and to care for them, no matter what the cost.
So people that take the kind of the cold, hard approach to this, why do they do that?
Well, obviously cost, and maybe there is bean counters or accountants that are ahead of them telling them that we have to do those things. But I think in general, if you ask a healthcare provider, people that go into nursing, people that go into medicine, it's because they want to help people.
They want to help.
Yeah, and they're not worried about the cost. They're worried about
the person.
The people. That's why we started.
That's our assignment. That's what they're gifted to do.
That's your gift. That's your spiritual gift.
But there are people that are watching or listening to this. That there was a trigger thing that you just said. My costs in America for my health care are astronomical, and we're very challenged. And so, like a Kansas dialysis at that time, they were only able to do what they did for Rosario because they had other resources that were coming in at the expense of someone else, like me.
That's correct.
Or you. So I'm paying for Rosario's care, and should I be required to do that, or should we let him die?
Right.
How do you deal with that?
We are a very rich nation, and I'll even extend that to pharmaceutical drugs. If you go to a different country, you may pay 1/10 of the cost because the U.S. Bears the burden of the R&D, the research and development of those new products, and then also the patent life is 17 to 21 years, something like that. And so, just even in medications, they shouldn't cost $300, $400, or $500, or $600, or $700. They probably cost a lot less, but it's because you're paying back that thing. And it's a weird system that we're in, that the haves that have pay more, and the haves that don't maybe pay less or pay none. But it so far is working. If you look at the political portion of it, though, it makes people angry on both sides.
It does. And so, do you think it's just a math issue and it's about a resource issue, or do you think it's a lack of understanding issue as well?
I think it's a lack of understanding issue if you were to look at it from a political aspect of it, because you can't inject compassion into a person.
Right.
You either have it or you don't. Right. And so, and I'm not trying to be political here, but no matter how you want to solve this problem, you're still going to have a problem. It's not going to be right for some person. And so, as far as healthcare goes, the people that are managing healthcare should be the ones that want to do healthcare.
And I think by and large they do really well.
They do a really good
they
job.
Do really well.
Yeah.
Whoever likes to go to the dentist or the doctor or whatever.
Correct.
Nobody. But when you're there, they are doing their job.
That's correct.
whether it's somebody who's illegal, or whether they're a drug addict, or whether they have mental illness, or victim of human trafficking and some of the behaviors that go on after that kind of trauma, or just homelessness in general. Unless you have encountered the person, not the subject. The subject is easy to talk about.
Right.
We can say it's okay or it's not okay. Panhandling's all right, it's not okay. Outdoor camping's okay or it's not okay. And those are important subjects. I'm not saying we dismiss those, because they affect all of us. Healthcare being a part of that, who should pay for what. But until you find the person within the subject, like Rosario,
right,
until you look into someone's eyes and you are in that position where you got to make a decision about their welfare. And then a lot of times we can dismiss that to somebody else. We can say it's a police department's responsibility, or Department of Children and Families responsibility, or a governor's responsibility, or the president's responsibility, or somebody else's responsibility. But until you look into those person's eyes and maybe it becomes your responsibility, then it's easy to kick that political football down the field.
Correct.
And just take a side, just take a position on that. And so, Gary, I'm going to roll you back to Iraq again. Here is a guy that 3 weeks before was trying to shoot at you.
Yeah.
You're doing guard duty,
as
well as doing the medical stuff too. I mean, that's interesting. So nobody gets out of that job, huh?
No, you do them both.
In case they're coming over the hill, you got to make sure you guys don't get shot and die too. Okay, so you got the professional piece, okay? This is what you do. This is why you went into what you went into. But what's it like looking into the eyes of somebody who is so desperate, who you don't necessarily totally understand their history, you don't understand if they got kids, you don't understand anything. But what's it like looking into that eyes when they're looking at you asking for help?
Right. I think that kind of ties into a lot like treating patients. You never know when you start to treat the patient that someone's going to change. And whether it's someone that has funds or doesn't have funds, someone that likes you or doesn't like you, you're trying to do the best to help them medically, maybe spiritually.
Yes.
You're not invested in anything else. That's your one and only job. Whether they choose to grasp that and do what you tell them to do, or to follow the medical course or whatever, that's up to them. But you don't give up on them. I can't tell you how often I've had patients in my last 18 years, at least, where you see him every 3 months and you think, well, this person's just lost. I'll see him back in 3 months, he'll still be lost. And you know what? All of a sudden, something clicks. And all of a sudden, their diabetes is under great control. I'm thinking of one guy, and I said, you've been doing bad forever. How come all of a sudden you're better? He goes, I don't know. I just started following your advice. And they feel better.
Right.
And so, I guess to answer your question maybe in a roundabout way, you can't ever give up on someone. You do your best. I call it the abbreviated warm fuzzy. So I have a couple students that come through, and you want each person to feel, loved on, that you remember them. I say we're the best KU cheerleaders, or we're the best Mark Mangino. You love on them like a cheerleader, or you have to hold their feet to the fire to get better. But
Mangino style.
Mangino is the you're going to get better.
To the fire, right?
Yeah, and I think you have to have compassion in healthcare. It doesn't matter where the money comes from, and same thing with a war experience. Go back through other wars. The people that you were shooting at are now your prisoners, and now you have to take care of them. Wow. And the reality is, 20 minutes after a firefight, and these guys surrender, they're sharing cigarettes. No one wants to be there in a war.
Right.
Nobody. We all want it over.
Right. And that's what I think about, people that come to work at the rescue mission. They are volunteering at the rescue mission. There is so much relationship that goes on here. The organic opportunities that occur, that God just brings us all together out of controversy, and fortunately not in a war zone like you were in, but it's a war zone of people's lives. The Rosario was in a war zone of his own life. He's in a foreign land, doesn't speak the language, he's lost, can't get back home, don't know what brought him here. He wanted to go home. We couldn't get him home. He is sick, and we're in a war. He's in a war, but yet somehow God brings those controversies, that darkness that we experience, and we begin to see the light of the situation. We begin to see he's a good guy, and he began to see we're not too bad either.
Right.
And we became friends. And that's what we see all the time. And it's so easy to blog, or it's so easy to have an opinion, or just say, those lazy or those whatevers, just let them die.
Right.
But when people come face to face, if they will take that chance to be able to really allow God to expose his heart in someone like Rosario and someone like me and others that helped a guy like that, then we have an opportunity to do something. Gary, just as we finish up here, any last thoughts in regards to what would be good for people to really think about?
Mm-hmm. I say probably never give up on someone, because you never know when they're going to do what you ask. But to kind of dovetail into that, what impact have you made into their lives? What impact did you make into Rosario's life as far as the people he's interacting with as he's going about his day, going to dialysis, talking about what the rescue mission was doing? Mm-hmm. God's love doesn't stop just with one interaction.
That's good.
It's like ping pong, and it just keeps on going back and forth. And so you never know how your love towards another human being is going to change that person, and they may love someone else.
That's well said. And I think that we have to be bold enough to take that step of faith, to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to love somebody we don't understand. And when we do that, not only Rosario received love from a lot of people beyond the rescue mission in this community, but also we found the love from him back to us. Mm-hmm. And we found a common bond through our adversity, through our darkness, through our challenge, whatever it was. And this is repeated hundreds of times, just in our community, just with the homeless every single day. That connection between the challenges that people have and the people who want to be there for them. I hear it from volunteers all the time. The homeless give back to me way more than I give to them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Well, they don't reach in their pocket and give them cash. They don't give them a car. They don't give them a vacation to Disneyland. They don't give them anything. What do they give them? They give them the understanding that this is purposeful, that this is impactful, that this is important, that both of us matter in that regard. Gary, thanks for coming along. I just appreciate you so much, and I appreciate your perspectives professionally as well as personally. And so thanks for joining us. And if you've been watching this has probably stirred you just a little bit in regards to this whole issue that we're talking about in this country. And it's not an easy issue to solve. We do have significant challenges in our communities nationally with homelessness, and some people that are legal and some people that aren't legal. But the heart of God is what we are hoping to understand. What does he say? What does he say to you? If you could just remove yourself from the politics of it, from the emotion of it, and at some point in some time look into someone's eyes as you would hope they look into yours, when you're suffering, when you're lost, when you're lonely, when you're misunderstood, wondering if you matter, if you could look into their eyes and understand that maybe today is that day that you might turn their life around, like Gary said, you never know when somebody's going to turn their life around. So if you're in darkness today, know that somehow, some way, that God's going to show you there is another day. If maybe you can be that light in someone's life, to be able to understand that there is hope, to be able to smile at them, to say a good word, and maybe even keep them alive when others don't necessarily care about them. That's what In Darkness, a Light Still Shines is all about, to help people to understand in the midst of their darkness, we do have a loving God, and he's called some loving people to join, to be with them, to bring light into this dark world. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you to Furniture Mall of Kansas for sponsoring the In Darkness, a Light Still Shines video podcast. We appreciate your support.
Lord, in all of the challenges, battles, and trials I face, help me to never lose hope. Because you never fail and have never given up on me, help me to extend that same grace to others I might be tempted to forsake. Help me to turn my back on the past and embrace the new possibilities of the future. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for joining us. Our goal is to inspire, inform, and equip you to engage in the community around you. Join us next week for another episode of In Darkness, a Light Still Shines.